What's up, guys? My name's Deegan, and today I'm going to be reading you a creepypasta called The Cell Phone Game. Now, I'm pretty interested in creepypastas now that Alex gave me a little narration yesterday of the story called Jeff the Killer. It's a kind of image where it says go to sleep. Creepy stuff, creepypasta. I just thought it was a good idea to put on ZappStudios. I'm going to be doing some voice effects or audio effects on the actual narration, so it'll be a little bit more interesting. So yeah, guys, these might be coming more in the future if I get some support for this. And yeah, let's get started. There's a little link in the description that you can click on. I'm gonna pause the video for you, and you can open a new tab and read along. So yeah, guys, pause video now, and I love you. Let's go. The Cell Phone Game. Howdy, you can call me Jack. It's not my real name, but that's what I'll go by for now. I reckon the time to tell you that my story has come. Believe it or not, but here it is. I suggest you take away the lessons it teaches, even if you dismiss it as bullshit like 98% of the other stories on the internet. But there's more truth in this story than any one of you could know. Now, I've been in high school for 3 years. I've been out of it. But that's when this particular event takes place, so I'm going to have to wind my clock back a little to tell this story. Originally, for my first 2.5 years of high school, I attended a school in the deep southern part of America, close to the Gulf. We had all kinds of ghost stories growing up, and if there was one lesson of super conservative parents taught us, it was this: don't go fooling around in things you don't understand. Now, I was really unpopular at my high school in the South. My first 2 years of high school were a real pain because I was a big dork and everybody made fun of me. I was a loner, and all I really did in class was play my Game Boy all day before rushing home to play an MMO I was addicted to. All that changed during my junior year when my mother's job moved us out west. I started to attend a little Catholic high school with no more than 250 students. It was at this time that I finally started to fit in and make friends. No one out here knew how much of a dork I was, so I opted to hide my power level, as they tend to say. And I tried to make friends for once in my life. Who knows, maybe I could even get a cute girlfriend if I was careful. I started to meet people at my school. At a school that's small, you end up knowing everyone in your class. My first day I made a new friend named Sam, and at lunch I opted to sit with him and his friends. He told me all about the other kids at the school, who was most popular, who the jocks were, so on and so forth. He introduced me to his friends too: Jim, a big jovial fellow who tipped his scales to 300 pounds, Vogelman, our table's resident computer nerd and hacker, and Thomas, a musician who played electric guitar. I also met Stephanie, the school's resident spunky Asian girl. Some of the guys said she was a bit of a bitch, but she seemed cool enough. She was into gaming and never messed with any of us. She seemed to think I was funny, so maybe that's why she started to call me home after school on some days. Sam told me all kinds of stories about her, like how she used to snack for guys at school but then sprinkle Viagra all over their poor laxatives into them so that anyone who ate it would suffer the brunt of any painful and arguably cruel joke. I just chuckled to myself, politely refused whenever she offered me anything. Then there was Rottenbacher. His real name was Jason, but everyone called him Rottenbacher, or the Crot, because he was a hardcore Nazi. He was an outcast and a loner. No one wanted to be associated with him. Every day he'd wear a red swastika armband to school just beneath his jacket where the teachers couldn't see. But whenever he got hot, slip it off, or whenever he was changing in the locker room, he'd be wearing a Nazi armband. Furthermore, on Halloween, on the school costume event days, he knew he could get away with it. Rottenbacher always wore an entire replica of an SS uniform, like the Gestapo wear, with the black hat and long boots. He was a mean, angsty son of a bitch. Whenever anyone told him about him or asked him about Nazi stuff, he'd shout racial and ethnic slurs at them, cuss them out, and yell, "Hail Hitler!" Furthermore, one peculiar thing that caught my eye was that I couldn't help but notice Rodenbacher always walked with a slight limp, like he was in pain. Sam told me that somebody once saw him tightening a barbed silus in the locker room like the ones Catholic priests wear to punish themselves for their sins. It was Catholic school, so I, like most people, just assumed that at the time that maybe he wore a silus. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, because he is a devout Christian. It was kind of strange for a hardcore Hitler lover like Rodenbacher, but it was high school, and none of us preferred to think too much of stuff like that. After he got done introducing me to everyone, Sam told me of school's old stories, including an urban legend that circulated about Kaylee, a girl who died mysteriously after playing some sort of cell phone game. Sure enough, he could point some girl in the yearbook to tell me everyone recalled the police had declared her missing under mysterious circumstances. She presumed dead almost immediately thereafter. If you asked anyone exactly what happened, no one could tell you a damn thing. They always just said it was because she played the cell phone game. Sam, Stephanie the cute mischievous Asian. Rodenbacher, the self-torturing Nazi. The cell phone game. The police investigation of the teen's disappearance. All of these people and events were about to come together to drag me into something in which I never wanted to be a part of. It wouldn't even be until over 2 years later that I finally understood how and why everything went down just the way it did. Anyway, the last half of junior year came and went, and the long summer passed all by in what seemed like a heartbeat. It was finally time to begin our last year of high school. Everyone was back for the new school year, pumped to start the laziest and most fun year of our high school lives. Even Rodenbacher, still limping around school in that barbed silus, still spouting his Nazi garbage every time someone decided to mess with him. The year started eerily quiet. Word was that 2 more cell phone game related disappearances had happened over the summer to one boy and one girl from another high school, and that the police were investigating a possible serial killer. According to the paper, the only common link the police had found was that every person who disappeared had received a text message that read, "Welcome to the game." None of the text messages had been sent from the same cell phone, so this is evidence that had been dismissed or circumstantial. For me, things weren't half bad. It was this year when I finally started to open more as a person. I had made a good circle of friends who I trusted, and I feel more calm in myself at this point. Gradually, I started to fit in more, and pretty soon I was pretty popular in certain circles. Stephanie liked to hang out with me more and more because of how funny she thought my jokes were. Before long, one day, which I remember, because it was the happiest one of my life, she came to me in the middle of campus after school and looked up to me with the beautiful Asian eyes and that long black hair and a smile to die for. She asked me right then, "Jack, will you go out with me?" I laughed, ran, and jumped for joy. "Of course I will," I said, and I danced around with her in front of everyone. I finally had a girlfriend. I still remember that as one of the happiest days of my entire life, if not the happiest. We went on dates, we hung out after school, and she even started to eat lunch with Sam, Jim, Vogelman, and every day. Maybe I wouldn't have been so happy had I known what was going to happen next. It was one day at lunch, she was sitting with us, when she mentioned that while sleeping with her friends one night, she had stayed up late and some girls in another high school were talking about the cell phone game. She said that these girls all knew the rules of the game, and they explained to her in great detail. Supposedly you can join the game at any time by sending a text message at midnight to the right phone number. The text message was supposed to say, "I wish for the power to curse." If you did it right, you would get a message in return that said, "Welcome to the game," and supposedly this was the reason they had given for why the police found the message on all the phones that had disappeared. Stephanie went on to talk about the game. We all listened attentively to what she was saying. She told us that once someone was in the game, they were in danger. Within 2 weeks, they had to complete one of a number of different tasks, or else they would be dragged away in the night. I stopped her right there. Dragged away? By what? To where? She got silent for a moment. "I don't know," she whispered. before continuing her story. She said that in order to protect oneself from being dragged away, you could do two things. The first was to find a special protective item. The item could be anything. You never knew what it was going to be, but it seemed that whatever the item was, it would make the bearer suffer in some way. This was considered a small price to pay in return for protection as long as you wore the item. The second way was to bring someone else into the game. This could be done by sending the text message, "Welcome to the game," to someone else's phone. If someone received a text message from someone else who was in the game, it was meant for the person now in the game too, and subject to all the same rules and consequences of the game. If the person didn't find a protective item themselves, or bring another person to the game, they would be dragged away. The catch about the second was this. While the protective item, if found, could protect you indefinitely so long as you kept it with you, bringing someone else into the game would only buy you a temporary grace period. The first time you brought somebody into the game, you get a 2-week extension. Then only 1 week. Eventually the grace period would get shorter and shorter until you barely bought yourself any time at all bringing someone else into the game. By that time you needed to have found a protective item. Even though I've always been something of an pedophile, I don't know, I didn't like hearing her talk about this stuff, so I told her it was a bunch of nonsense. "You think so?" she asked. "If it's true, it would explain what the police found, and imagine how cool it'd be if able to curse anyone who messed with you and bring them back into the game. You could get rid of anyone, and no one would ever know." There was an edge in her voice I'd never heard from Stephanie. She almost sounded intoxicated at the thought of it. Truth be told, it scared me a little. "Don't go talking like that," I told her. "Stuff like that's beyond people like you and me. We shouldn't go messing with stuff like that. What if you got involved in it, and then it turned out to be true? What would you do if something happened like that to you? Promise me you won't try it." She sighed in annoyance. Fine, I won't play this scary cell phone game. Are you happy now?" I told her I was, but the truth be told, I was scared. I didn't believe her. In all the time I'd known her, I'd never seen her betray anyone or sleep around or anything. But she'd always been a trickster and a liar, and would lie to anyone and anything if it got her ahead without hurting anyone else. But to be honest, I always thought it was kind of cute and just accepted it as one of her quirks. But this time, it was serious. So a few days later, she came back and told us that she had joined the cell phone game. I was pissed. "What are you thinking, Stephanie? You promised me you wouldn't do that." Yeah, I know. But it's not a big deal. I've already got it planned out. Besides, if it's true and it works, it's too good of an opportunity to pass up. She held up her cell phone. "Look!" And she said giddily. A text message was open on the screen which read, "Welcome to the game." Kind of freaky, huh? I got it just after I sent the text last night, just like the girl said. My jaws dropped. I was speechless and scared stiff. This game couldn't be for real, could it? "Stephanie, if this is real, you're in danger now. You've only got 2 weeks to find that protective item." "I know. That's why I've sent the text to Rebecca. I'm gonna find out if it's true or not." I hit the roof. "You did what?" "But Stephanie, if this is real, then that means you're as good as a murderer. You cursed Rebecca, and now she could die because of you." "Relax, Jack. I don't actually believe any of this stuff. But even if it did, Rebecca's always been a big-time bitch. It's not like she doesn't have it coming anyway." She giggled. That same mischievous giggle of hers I've always loved. But this time, I wasn't loving any part of it. A couple of weeks passed and nothing happened, but then, one day, Rebecca didn't show up to school. At lunchtime, Stephanie was sitting around with us, as usual, when the assistant principal came to talk to us with a megaphone. "May I have your attention, please?" Everyone got silent. "The police have reported that one of your fellow students, Rebecca, has gone missing." Stephanie's golden skin turned white. She froze. Her parents were very worried about her. "If any of you know about this, please come and talk to me after school. That is all." "Stephanie," I whispered. I was very afraid for her. I was very afraid what she might do. She looked at me and said, "Don't say anything, just don't." She got up and bolted out of the lunchroom. I chased after her. Stephanie, what are you doing?" She kept jogging away from me, her cell phone out. Don't try to stop me, Jack. If I'm going to survive, I'm going to need more time. I can get another week if I curse someone else, and that'll give me 3 weeks to find it. Stephanie, listen to yourself. Who are you going to curse? You'd kill someone else just for a little extra time? Look what's happened to you. She was starting to cry. I know, damn it, but I know I'm going to curse. No one's going to miss them, I promise. Stephanie, that's not right. You can't do it. No one deserves this. Let me help you. We can find a protective object for you together. She turned and showed me her cell phone. Her text outbox had a message that read, "Welcome to the game." She had sent it to Rottenbacher. I started to weep. I grabbed onto her as tightly as I could. Stephanie, Stephanie, I love you. I'm so sorry. This isn't right. None of this is right. She held on to me and began to cry deeply as well. We held each other there for nearly an hour like that. I still remember it like it was yesterday. Then, that night before we went home, we both resolved we would start looking for a protective item the next day. The next day I was walking with Stephanie along the track after school, and Rottenbacher approached us with his cell phone. He was furious. He held it up to her face. "Is this your idea of a joke, you stupid slant-eyed bitch?" Truth be told, I felt Rottenbacher had the right to be a little angry. Sure, he was a Nazi pervert freak, but with all that whispers of murder going around, I could imagine anyone being angry at getting a text like that. But even so, I wasn't about to let anyone talk to my girl that way. "Hey buddy, you watch your mouth. That's no way to talk to a lady." "Lady," Rottenbacher shouted. "This fucking slut is not a lady. She's a bitch. She tried to kill me. I bet you killed the other girl too, didn't you, Rebecca? She's missing because of you, isn't she?" Stephanie began to cry again. I pulled my arm back and punched as hard as I could in Rottenbacher's face. He stumbled backwards a few steps and grabbed at his lip. From trickled a little stream of blood, but he kept his composure. I halfway expected him to swing back at me, but he just stood there. After a moment he spoke. "You just don't get it, do you, Stephanie? I'm already in the game. I have always been. I know the fucking score, but unlike you, I've never cursed anyone else." "Bullshit," she said. "If that's all true, then how are you still—" Suddenly, I remembered the syllabus Rottenbacher wore on his leg that caused him to limp in agony. But Stephanie had told me at lunch, whatever protective item was discovered, whatever it would cause its bearer to suffer. Your protective item? You have one. Stephanie's eyes lit up. It was clear that she had realized the same thing I had. Rottenbacher smirked. "That's right. So he just figured out your girlfriend better know. Wish you didn't get an additional time for the curse me. I've already been here and done that." Stephanie looked up at him with fear in her eyes. Days passed, and try as we might, Stephanie and I couldn't get anything that could qualify as a protective item. We were approaching the 2-week deadline, and she was looking more and more scared by the day. Her hair was a mess. Her usually bubbly personality was glum and distraught. She stared off into space during classes and prayed constantly. After a 2-week deadline had passed, we were both terrified. She came to me at school and said, "Jack, I want you to sleep with me tonight. Stay with me all night. Don't let it get me." I couldn't refuse. I showed up at her house late at night and came through her window. We slept together. It was bittersweet. She went to sleep holding me, but I lay awake most of the night watching and waiting until I finally fell asleep around 4:30 in the morning from sheer exhaustion. The next day when I woke up, all I could think was, "Stephanie." I looked around frantically. She wasn't in the bed next to me. "Stephanie," I said louder as I climbed out of bed, began to search for her. I walked into her kitchen. "Don't be so loud," a voice said. It was Stephanie's. I turned around to see her sitting on a round table in the kitchen. She was smiling and seemed as giddy as ever. I breathed a sigh of relief. "My parents have already gone to work, but I don't want the neighbors to get suspicious or say something." I wept with relief. It was over and she was safe. Nothing had come for her. I ran across the kitchen floor and hugged her and kissed her all over. Everything was perfect. For 2 weeks, then I came to school one day, and 9 classmates had disappeared, including Sam. Everyone was in an uproar. No one knew what had happened to them, or where they had gone. No one except for me and the person who had done it, Stephanie. If the amount of time extended was half the time you brought someone to the game, then 9 people would have brought her just over 2 weeks, which meant that her time would be running out again tonight. I confronted her about it after school. Stephanie, the police are getting suspicious. You can't do this anymore, and I can't watch you do this anymore. It's wrong. It's evil. She looked at me silently. I still remember the look in her eyes that day. At this point, it had become clear to me that the girl I had known and loved was long gone, and all that remained was her soulless, wicked shell, and clung to life as I feared death more than anything. But even so, I still loved her more than anything. She was my first and only girlfriend, and I couldn't let her go. I couldn't let anything happen to her. It's okay, she said. I won't do it anymore. I've accepted what I need to do, and I'm gonna do it. No one else is gonna die because of me. Stephanie, are you sure? Maybe we can find a protective item for you to look for. She looked down sadly. There's no use in running from it now. I just want to spend the night with you tonight, okay? One more night together, that's all I want. I was heartbroken. Everything was too melancholic and melodramatic. I was so sad at hearing her words, at the thought of her being taken away. I threw up. I vomited and retched over and over again into a nearby garbage can, trying to fight back an endless stream of tears. That night she slept with me again. Sick, weak, and tired, I passed out from pure exhaustion at 3 a.m. Less than an hour later, though, I woke with a start. Stephanie was gone. I sat up and looked around in terror. Then I found a note. I read it. Jack, I'm sorry for lying to you again, but I'm not ready to die yet. A chill went down my spine. I continued to read. I figured out what I need to do. Don't worry, as I promised, no one else is going to die because of me. What could she be thinking? I looked around my room. Suddenly I noticed the .45 caliber pistol my father had bought me for my 18th birthday was missing, and it made perfect sense. That's why she wanted to spend the night with me tonight. She wanted my gun. She was planning to go after Rottenbacher and get his protective item. As fast as I could, I threw on some clothes and bolted for my truck. I sped off towards Rottenbacher's apartment. When I got there, the lock had been shut off, and there were voices inside. I pushed the door open. What's going on here? I demanded. I looked around. Stephanie was holding Rottenbacher at gunpoint with my .45. The apartment walls were covered in pictures of Adolf Hitler and swastika banners. There were whips and chains scattered around the bedroom floor. Rottenbacher was stomping around in long-sleeved pajamas and cursing at her with his typical neo-Nazi form, screaming at her about home invasion and calling the police and this and that. He was even wearing that stupid Nazi armband. It was obvious this guy was a lunatic fanatic. Stephanie screamed at him, "Shut the fuck up!" She fired around at the wall behind him and winced. I remember my ears ringing from the loudness of the gunshot and a sharp pain in my inner ear, but I was too tense to worry about it at the moment. "Now give me that barbed torture thing that you're always wearing, or I'll kill you now." Her voice was all malice. Rottenbacher stood in place for a moment and slowly began to remove his pajama leggings. "You're making a big mistake," he said. "You should just accept the way things are and die with dignity. You're not going to get away with this." He removed the sillage from his leg, from which trickled a small amount of blood, and handed it to her. Immediately she slipped it onto her own leg with one hand, fumbling with my pistol as she tightened it, and her own leg began to bleed a little. "Let's go, Jack," she whispered, turned to leave. I started to walk out with her. From the apartment I heard Rottenbacher shouting, "You won't get away with this. He's gonna come after you, and he's gonna drag you off to hell for what you've done. You're gonna pay for all those kids." I could see she was sobbing a little as she walked away. I was disgusted with Stephanie for being so cruel and selfish, and I was disgusted for myself for seeing all of this, and seeing the signs and not doing anything to stop it. But at least now it would be over. As we walked back to my truck, I said a small prayer for Rottenbacher in the hopes that he could find a new protective item within 2 weeks. He may have been a racist bastard, but in a way, he was still better than Stephanie if what he said about never cursing anyone else was true, and he didn't deserve to die just for that. I drove Stephanie home. She was exhausted. I would have given her a kiss on the cheek, but I was too sick and just wanted the whole ordeal to be over. "Good night," I whispered to her. "Good night, Jack. I love you," she whispered back. And I climbed out of my truck and went back to her house. I started to drive home, exhausted from the day's events. Suddenly, my cell phone began to vibrate. I picked it up. It was a call from Stephanie. I answered. "Hello?" The first thing I heard was a shriek, followed by what sounded like the noise of a pounding at her door. "Jack, help! He's here, he's coming for me!" "What? Hold on, Steph!" I pulled a U-turn in my truck and sped off towards her home. Stephanie was becoming more frantic. Suddenly, on the other end of the line, I heard the sound of her door being bashed in, followed by another shriek. I could hear Stephanie screaming at the top of her lungs, a hideous, blood-curdling scream. I still remember every moment of it perfectly, and I remember her scream word for word. "No, no, I don't want to die!" Adrenaline surged through my heart, and I floored the accelerator. "No, no, stop!" She screamed again, and what sounded like the phone hitting the floor, and Stephanie's scream getting further and further away, and then dead air. "Stephanie! Stephanie, answer me! Stephanie! 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 Stephanie, answer me, damn it!" Getting no response, I hung up and called the police. When I arrived at Stephanie's house, the front door had been smashed in. I parked my car on her lawn and jumped out, carrying my .45 caliber with me. I ran inside, searching the halls. Everything was in slow motion. Then I came to Stephanie's bedroom. I turned on the light and checked all the corners with my pistol leading the way. At length I lowered the gun as something caught my eye in the center of the room. Stephanie's cell phone lay on the floor next to her bed. In the middle of the room, in the carpet, was a very small patch of blood. It wasn't more than a few drops. But the most chilling sight of all was from the edge of her bed to the door of her room, which led out to the hall, was a trail of claw marks that she had left, as if something or someone had dragged her away from her room. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and left her room. On the way out, I couldn't help but notice that she had torn out most of her fingernails clawing at the carpet, and that they had lay scattered near the trails she left. I went out into the street and threw up again. I could hear the sirens coming in the distance. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The police did investigations. They questioned me time and time again, and every time my stories were all the same. I told them the truth as I knew it, as unbelievable as it was. I don't think they believed me, but all the evidence supported my story, and there was nothing to implicate me in any of the crimes. So at length, they finally let me go. Things gradually went back to normal. Our class eventually recovered from the losses of so many of our classmates, and over time my mind kind of accepted what happened, until it seemed like a distant dream. I graduated and moved on to college. But there was one thing that still bothered me through it all, and that was Rottenbacher. He had been exactly right. Even though Stephanie had taken his solace, he never vanished in the way that she and the others did. But there's one thing that I do know, and that is to this very day, if you ever see Rottenbacher, he's still wearing that red Nazi swastika armband.